Good afternoon. It's great to see you guys here today, especially outside. It's a beautiful weather, and still I see everyone sitting here. It's exciting. Anyways, there is a lot of talk about red lentils from the harsh tariffs in India, the fumigation requirements, and the Mother Nature's desert-like conditions. One thing for sure, the next hour will not be boring. My name is Farhan from Marina Commodities. I had a tough decision to make, either to stay home or cheer on Toronto Raptors in playing basketball. But I'm here being a moderator today, and I'm here excited to be in presence of such an esteemed panel. Please join me in welcoming Brett Dodson from Australia Grain Exports, Australia. Mohammed Ahmed from Awam Group in Pakistan. Onur Ozdemir from AGT in Turkey. Rajendren from Gnanasambantham Imports, Sri Lanka. And someone will be on a hot seat today, Parag Gadre from ETG, India. As the panel settles in, does anyone have Cricket World Cup on their minds? I'm sure people do. With this distinguished group today, we have our own share of batting out good ideas, bowling predictions, and perhaps some fielding some great questions. But today there will be no overtime. We have agreed to share our knowledge and passion from important regions affecting the red lentils trade. After our discussions, we will head into a Q&A session where our audience will have opportunity to get involved. Let's get started. In a nutshell, government policies are the main discussion point in the headlines surrounding all pulses. From harsh tariffs of 33% imposed by the largest consumer of lentils to the fumigation requirements and glyphosate issues evolving, the future of red lentils is questionable. With India, Canada, and Australia facing some dry weather, we sure are in the weather market. And in the coming weeks to come, this will dictate where the market will take us. As we all know, we are in a historic low price environment for most pulses, especially red lentils. With such bleak outlook last October, where prices were trading as low as $360, the future was unknown. Today, the prices have improved slightly, and with this logic, the seeding should have gone down around the world. Unfortunately, the alternate crop returns were not yielding any better, and hence a very small drop in production might be seen if we have perfect weather. Lately, Mother Nature has been far from perfect. Let's look at the North American red lentil production estimates. Canadian growers were excited in 2016 and produced more than 2 million tons, and then settled down in 2018 to about 1.4 million tons. However, we had a large carryover of almost 700,000 tons. There were very strong export numbers coming out, and we expect almost 1.2 million tons to be exported this year. After domestic use, seed, and feed, we will end up with a very small carryover of 300,000 tons, leaving us in a tight supply situation in the new crop year forward. Going forward in 2019, the earlier estimates, we saw crop sizes decreasing by at least 15 to 20%. But during this time of seeding, there were some recent hikes in prices. We traded as low as 14 cents at one time, and during the seeding time, the market went up to 18 to 20 cents. And therefore, the seeding got bumped up, and we expect similar crop production as last year of 1.4 million tons. However, with a smaller carryover, we might see some squeeze in supply. The hot discussion in Canada today, along with the Raptors, reigning champions, is the rain that is so desperately needed to get this crop going. The largest unknown is the yield estimate as the topsoil moisture continues to deteriorate. There's no need to panic now, but obviously we are counting on the Mother Nature to buzz in and do what is best, only time will tell. Another buzzword in our industry is Black Sea. The pulse production keeps increasing in that region, and lentils from Kazakhstan and Russia are gaining huge importance. Canada is definitely losing its market share, especially in Turkey, and these lentils are being accepted in all countries. Let's find out what is happening around the world. Since we are talking about the Black Sea, let's start off with Onur, who's from Turkey and the largest importer from Kazakhstan. Onur?
Hello. Hi. Before going to Kazakhstan or Black Sea, I would like to start from Turkey,
Sure.
if you don't mind. Canada is the biggest producer, as you can see from Farhan's presentation. Also biggest exporter, but they are not importer or consumers. India is the biggest consumer, but they are not exporting any. So Turkey, however, has a major role in this red lentil market. We are producers, exporters, importers, and consumers, like four legs of a chair. In Turkey, there are more than 25 companies with annual processing capacity of 2 million tons. If you look at Turkey's pulse production, it's about 1.2 million tons, and 25% of this is red lentils. It is a sad fact that 30 years ago, only red production was close to 1 million tons in Turkey. Now it's down to 300,000 tons. This year, it is estimated that we will have 380,000 tons of red lentils. It's a 26% increase compared to last year. Harvest just started, and in Mersin we are receiving the first trucks. The news coming from the origins are yield are not as expected as it is. So it will be very hard to achieve this 380,000 tons of estimation. But there's also good news with this new harvest, that the white spotted lentils are less than the usual. So the quality of Turkish lentils will be better this year. As per FAO statistics, 30 years ago, Turkey was producing 39% of world lentils. It's a big number. Since then, the world lentil production has increased 185%, and Turkey's dropped 63%. So back then, we were exporting about 70% of world lentils, and now, as you can see, we are importers. The reason of this less production is that Southeast Anatolia, which is the main growing region in Turkey, has been converted from dry land to irrigated land. So with this irrigated lands being more, farmers have switched to more cash-generating crops like cotton, or they seed twice. They do 2 harvests with corn and wheat. So what we can do in Turkey to increase our production? This is one of the main questions we have. Turkey has about 3.7 million hectares of fallow land. And fallow land means resting land. Nothing is being planted. These areas are usually drier than the normal land, but it can be used for red lentils. So there are pilot programs happening in central Anatolia, the cities Konya, Çankırı, and Çorum, and the outcome is promising. And as Turkish leaders of this industry, we should support these programs. Our government is also working very hard to increase the pulse production in Turkey. You can see this effort from the incentives given to the farmers. Today, government is paying 50 cents to the Turkish farmer who produces lentils. And if they produce on the dry land, this 75 cents is higher. 75 cents will be for the drier land. And if you look, TMO's minimum buying price of 2.5 Turkish liras, You basically get 33% support on these lentil prices. Government also subsidizes on gas, oil, and fertilizers and allow extra cash for farmers who use certified seeds. Do you know when was the last time TMO has announced a minimum support program like this? Any guess? 26 years ago.
Wow.
So we see that our government is working to increase this production. Let's look at Turkey's figure right now on red lentils. Like I said, as we are doing the four sides of the chair, four legs of the chair, we consume what we produce and we export what we import. So last year, the production was 310,000 tons. Consumption is about 300,000 tons. Imports were 300 to 330,000 tons, and our exports are 290,000 tons. Our main markets are Iraq, Sudan, and Egypt. Canada has been our main supplier for many years until a new and disruptive origin has came to place, and it is Kazakhstan. We don't see this in the slide, but I'll give you some numbers about Kazakhstan now and how it's so important. Kazakhstan pulse production area was last season 433,000 tons. 433,000 hectares. And this produced about 290,000 tons of lentils, 45,000 tons of greens, and the rest is reds. According to my calculations, Turkey has imported about 170,000 tons of red lentils from Kazakhstan because of the cheap price and the closeness, logistical closeness of it. This year, total seeded area for pulses is 28% lower because the farmers couldn't get much support. It's down to 308,000 hectares, but yields expected to be higher. If all goes well, I estimate that about 200,000 tons of red lentils will be ready for export from Kazakhstan. Interesting fact that Kazakhstan has 22.1 million hectare planting area, and lentils only take about 0.8% of it. For total pulses that Kazakhstan produce, it's only 1.4%. So can you imagine how much they can grow more if the prices are supportive to the farmers? I want to talk about the problems of Kazakhstan that is facing too. In a very short, I'm finishing up.
Okay.
In my opinion, the main problem that Kazakhstan is facing is the logistic issues. If they can overcome of these logistic issues, it will be a very competitive market than it is right now. And the lack of standard they have for pulses. There's no standard. So they are copying basically number three specs of Canada. And they trade it with that. So if you are lucky, you'll get number 2 quality lentils from them. If you are unlucky, you'll get extra 3 or number 3. Like our president said, we have to work on this globalized standard. So every importer or exporting country can be on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you, Onur. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure we will all have a lot of questions for you in the end. So, just a couple of years back, Canada almost shipped 1 million tons into India, and now only 250,000 tons. You know, you are sitting on a very hot seat, Parag. Let's talk about what is happening in India, and everybody is very excited to hear some good news, hopefully.
Okay, so of course I prepared a deck which actually gives perspective in terms of miller's outlook. It is not only a trader's outlook. For instance, we at ETG, we have around 1800 tons per day capacity built in India, of which around 400 tons per day is for lentils. Right? So we always look at it and we try and balance the perspective as a trader as well as a miller. So that is first. So I actually put one chart where I showed what exactly gets produced, right? From whatever raw material what we ship from various countries, and we receive either imported or we buy from our farms. And then there are, there are yield charts. Around 83% of it is, higher realization what we earn out of, gota, what we call, which is a whole football. And then there are splits. And then the rest is all, husk and other rejections. So this is one commodity in India which is not restricted or banned, right? So, but at the same time, there are, there is 30% import duty, 10% surcharge. So both put together, it makes it 33% tariff. At the same time, there are certain government interventions, which is not only on red lentils, but, to support and grow farmers' income. There are minimum support price, which is being offered. In case of red lentils, it is 4250 per quintal. This is INR. So broadly, it will convert to around 615 USD, broadly. Why I'm giving this perspective? Because we have to look at overall demand-supply situation, keeping these things in mind. A very ballpark consumption, if you take average of last 4 to 5 years, the demand-driven consumption, end-user consumption of red lentils in India will be around 140,000 tons per month, which will amount to what, 1.6, 1.7 million tons per annum, of which anywhere between 1.1 million to 1.5 million tons gets produced in India. And there are certain, red lentil bowls in India, part of central India, which is Madhya Pradesh, which contributes highest, followed by, so around 620,000 tons comes from Madhya Pradesh, around 40,000 tons come from Uttar Pradesh. So there is the eastern belt, Ganges belt, which also produces red lentils. The rest of the demand is, obviously the gap is fulfilled through imports, which is another, So thanks for getting some of the charts back. So as I said, so this is what comes out of raw material, right? This is the whole presentation. So we can move on maybe. You can quickly go on to the India charts.
This one?
Go on. Okay, so just to give a perspective on, harvest time, when the sowing happens, it's a winter crop. We call it a Rabi crop in colloquial language in India. So it's October, November, December is the sowing season. Somewhere from February mid onwards, the harvest starts. And generally March, April, May are the arrival months where we get the crop in our mandi. Mandi is a marketplace or market gate where farmer gets his crop. Going by current data, now there are always, as far as production is concerned, production sowing in India is concerned, there are always two, streams of information. One is, of course, government published information, which is the data published by Ministry of Agriculture, and there are estimates which keep on getting revised. But it's such a diverse, this farming practices, it's very difficult to get, pinpointed number at the first go. So obviously there will be some variations. At the same time, many companies, including ours, we put our, foot soldiers on ground in mandis, and we try and figure out what exactly is going on in terms of, the sowing, in terms of crop availability, the seed retention, because the farmers may think of switching next year if MSPs are not commensurating with their expectation. And of course, the mandi arrivals. So I'm just trying to put some scenario here as far as, so the last column, if you can look at, it is trade estimate for this year. And if you go back 3 years, this is almost, similar scenario, what panned out in 15-16 for all the crops. Especially for pigeon peas, and it is going to be something similar for red lentils. Now the only difference in this year scenario is the stock holding with government, and some of our government delegates are sitting here. So government has learned its lesson, frankly, from the kind of shortage we faced in India in 15-16 and the kind of the price zoom up we had, the spike we had, which was absolutely unprecedented in last 2 decades in pulses industry in India. So the government stock holding getting into next festive season, July onwards, will be around, I'm not talking of lentils here, I'm talking, overall levels, will be around 4 million tons, which was never the case before, right? So that again will play a crucial role when determine S&D of red lentils. Yeah, you can move on. So India-specific S&D, if you look at, so government projection, the estimate is 1.5 million tons, whereas trade, I have taken the worst case in terms of less availability of a domestic crop from that perspective, 1 million ton. So it will vary between 1 to 1.2 million ton crop availability from the domestic market. It will eventually, and see, import figures are sacrosanct. The government procurement figures are sacrosanct because those are available, those are reported numbers. So the carry getting into next year will be 0.34, that is 34,000 tons, which is pretty low. So there is a possibility of this year reporting may not be a million level, but definitely 700,000 tons of imports. And that is highly likely to happen this year. Now, whether this will, how it will impact pricing. So maybe we can move on to next chart. Okay, just to substantiate the point of a lower crop produce availability in India, one of the major indicators is mandi or marketplace arrivals. And these are two big mandis. Uttar Pradesh is one of the states on the northern part. And the state of Madhya Pradesh is the pulses bowl of India. And if you look at the grey line, the grey thick line, where we have predicted some of the arrivals even for July, the arrivals are pretty low. Especially in UP market, they are almost at 50% level compared to previous years. Madhya Pradesh, it is going in tandem with what we experienced in last 2 years. So this will constitute to, at the most, availability of 1.2 million tons, which is a shortage of around 600,000 tons for sure. So I thought of sticking my neck out by giving some kind of price scenarios. And the black line, so we should be happy about it, frankly, compared to last previous 2 years. Obviously, it is trading at higher level. So I'm sure those who actually went long in last August, say August 18, and held on to their stocks are reaping benefits for sure. But then it has plateaued some, to a certain extent. And when we try and put up S&D vis-a-vis price movement in India, we have to factor in a lot of local nuances. So I've just tried to map maybe just a chart back. I tried to map over last 5 months how the price has moved. And you will experience there were some spikes in month of February and March. And there are a lot of local factors which play a role, because February was an early arrival which was expected from UP, but there was Mahakumbh Mela, that Kumbh festival which took place, so that delayed the transportation. Now those are ground realities, which obviously international traders may not be factoring in, and that is where the the connect with the domestic market comes handy. And that spike obviously couldn't last because the corrections happened going forward. There were also some of the news in terms of tur shortages, drought areas, and the confirmation also came from government side. So those spike later on got corrected because there were shipments happening. The millers, earlier triggered demand in month of February and March. Later on, obviously, the replenishment took place. There were also shipments which were back to back happening of imports.
But so let's hold our thoughts here. I think we are running
so
short on time. So
maybe we'll move on to the last.
We will discuss a little bit more when the question and answer session starts.
Right. So we'll move on to the maybe last chart. Now, there are certain factors which influence pricing. I mean, besides S&D, there obviously will be certain government interventions going forward. I would rather say those are calculated policy steps to control, because government will eventually have to balance interests of farmer in terms of providing the minimum support price, and during festival season, so it starts from July mid onwards and lasts till maybe November mid. They will have to look at the interests of mass consumers by controlling the price of the finished goods, right? So obviously there will be some interventions expected in pigeon peas especially, and which will obviously have impact, whether favorable, adverse, will be difficult to predict on lentils. So this is some predictions. This is one outlook. Of course, there could be multiple versions of the outlook. We expect.
Let's hope. Let's hear out from Australia.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then we'll talk. We'll come back to India.
I'm
There's
sure.
a lot of things to talk about.
Rather,
India,
I'll trigger
I know.
some, excitement in terms of,
Yes.
the price chart. So
Let's hear from Australia, from Brett, what he has to say with such a big yo-yo of pulse production coming from 200,000 tons going up to 1 million tons, and I don't even know where we are right now. So let's hear it out.
Thanks, Farhan. No, you're right. Probably the first thing I will say about Australian production is that our hectares can be quite stable, but it's our yields that change significantly. And Farhan's right. If you go back to 16-17 season, we did produce nearly 1 million tonnes and exported nearly every last drop of that season. That come through extraordinary yields. Generally, in Australia, our average over the years has been about 1.5 tonnes to the hectare, or slightly above. That season, some areas were producing up to 4 tonnes to the hectare, so it was extraordinary. The weather conditions were perfect. Australia that year was very aggressive in its program and hence had a very, very strong exports. We fast forward the next year, again the crop did come down through a reduction in acreage but also yields. We produced probably around 750,000 tonnes that year, and that's probably when the problem started. We had too many lentils in the world, and by the end of that season we had a carry-out of around 250,000 tonnes. That then extended into the following year where we had poor conditions. We had a drought essentially, and the figures are a little bit varied. Pulse Australia I think had up around 400,000, ABARE were around in the low 300,000s. My view, it's around that 335,000 tonnes. From that point though, we with the carry-in we had a surplus again. We've had quite weak exports for this year, totalling from November to March only just over 100,000 tonnes of exports. So at the pace that we're currently going, we're going to have another significant carry-out leading into this crop year. And we've had a pretty shaky start for everyone in Australia. We've had virtually the driest conditions on record since they've been keeping records through our summer period, which meant we had no rain virtually up until May, which is about our start of our seeding time. But since then we've been blessed with some good falls, and even last night there was 1 to 2 inches of rain across the southern parts of South Australia and Victoria. So I think ABARE come out today with their numbers. They're talking around 385,000 tonnes approximately. It's too early to say from a yield perspective because it's not really even just out of the ground hardly. But with a carry-out of 265 to 285,000 tonnes, we're going to have actually our exportable surplus by the end of this year could be greater than we've had in the previous year. So probably one saving grace for Australia is that as most people know now, is that we've had a major switch over the past years where nugget variety which was comparable to the crimson type, has been switched out to a nipper type, a small red, which now we're talking, different views, but between 75 to 80% of our crop is now small reds, which meant that we've had, some of that demand into Bangladesh for the footballs, some into Pakistan, Egypt, and obviously southern India and into Nepal. We've had that market to ourselves essentially.
So our Canadians will still have some hope of selling our crimsons to the world, huh?
Yeah.
That's good.
So, and which then sort of flows into that, our nugget types and the jumbo types, the larger types have obviously shrunk in production over the years, and so we've found it difficult to compete against Canada and Kazakhstan and other markets this year with our nuggets. Our growers believe they're worth a lot more money and obviously haven't been able to sell against Canadian prices. We've always been reasonably uncompetitive. So thankfully for the nipper types, for us, we've been quite active in that field and so we've been able to continue with our program.
Perfect. Okay, we'll have some questions for you in the end. Let's hear out from Sri Lanka. Rajendren, Sri Lanka is also a very important market for lentils. So
Yes.
let's hear what you have to say.
Yes, Sri Lanka is the only importing country. We are not producing or exporting.
Right.
Mainly, I can say our stable food every day, even 3 meals, so we need the dal. So that's very interesting in Sri Lanka. And especially we are not importing other tour dal or anything, only especially everybody likes red lentils and small quantities of yellow lentils are coming.
So how many tons do you import in Sri Lanka?
Last year we did about 145,000 tons, mainly from
145,000.
Canada and Australia.
And what is the share between Canada and Australia? I hope we are
About
more.
80,000 tons from Australia. And
80,000 tons from
Yeah,
Australia.
60,000 tons from this thing.
You have to shift that.
And apart from this, some split lentils also arrived about 10 to 15 percentage.
Okay. And
That's,
is Kazakhstan lentils coming into Sri Lanka as well?
I
or?
think a very small quantity, not a big quantity. Only very, very few quantities, maybe about 1,000 tons altogether.
So mainly all your red lentils which are coming in is, I'm assuming, for splitting.
Oh, yeah, all splittings. We have about major players of about 5 major players,
Okay.
millers, and we have a small.
And the reason Kazakhstan is not being imported yet, is there a particular reason? Because Turkey is also
Turkey is
splitting
buying
lentils,
the
but
entire- yeah, the-
so why is Sri Lanka not taking that
Actually,
step?
I think because of the logistics, as they said, logistics is the main problem for them.
Okay.
Either they have to only the Turkish exporters are exporting to Sri Lanka.
Okay. And so basically red lentils are your staple food, and
Yes, and mainly even the government tenders, they have to buy from the private sectors.
I see.
So every week there are tenders, and all the millers participate and they supply to the government.
All right.
And lentils is a very sensitive product to Sri Lanka. The government, they won't allow to go up. If it goes up, they will put a MRP. So that's a major problem in Sri Lanka. So we have to be, we have issues with the government sectors because they want to keep on, this dal price is always very low because that is the main consumption for people.
Okay, thank you. Ahmed, I'll ask you about the cricket match later on. Did Pakistan
don't
win
need
or
to
lose?
ask
It did? Australia won, huh? So what is happening in Pakistan, Ahmed? With all, it's become such a big red lentil player all around. It seems the consumption keeps going up, although your currency is devaluating. So let's hear you out.
Yeah, before answering your question, I'll tell you something, some important points regarding pulses into Pakistan. Pakistan per capita consumption is around 7 kg, which is significantly very low. We consume 1.6 million tons of total pulses in a year with a population of, with a big population, but the per capita consumption is very low. Majority of the consumption is done by the poor people, and that is the reason why we are so much price elastic. So if the prices of pulses are higher, then we'll see shift towards other commodities. And if the prices are lower, we'll see a higher demand. Now, the
True importer spoke. My highest whole lentils I sold was into Karachi 3-4 years back. That was $1,100 or $80.
Yep.
So there's no elasticity. There is something that's going on because Pakistan has evolved as one of the important markets for red lentils in the last 6 months. I think big consumption is happening.
Well, if you see the figures, no, we are pretty stable. We are importing around 90,000 to 110,000 tons. Our total consumption, I feel, is 120,000 tons. Normally, we have a crop of 10 to 15,000 tons. This year is even lower. It's around 5,000 tons only. Last year, at this time, our exchange rate was 112 to a US dollar. Today, our exchange rate is 152, which is a devaluation of 36%. So you see there's a lot of inflation and that affects a lot on demand. The reason why we are always in the market is that we buy in bits and pieces. You see small buyers buying small quantities and there are lots of buyers. So suddenly you see lots of people coming in asking you for product and you feel that it's a big demand.
Yes.
But I feel that our demand has been pretty stable.
So what do you think the distribution between the market share between Canada, Australia, and I think Kazakhstan is getting into Pakistan as well. So
see, it's price dependent. One thing is that Canada has its market share in Pakistan because we consume 50% of our red lentil as whole. So the bold size or the crimson variety is consumed as whole variety. For splitting, we use Australian lentils or Canadian lentil or Russian, Kazakh lentils, it all depends on the price. I mean, if we are getting Russians cheaper, like $40, $50 below the Canadian price, then people will go for the Russian lentils.
Okay.
Otherwise, the most preferred is Canadian lentils.
Okay.
And we do have demand for smaller variety, which is Nipper from Australia, but that is very niche.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let's open the floor for Q&A session. Any questions? Yeah. So this question is for you, Parag. Will India lower import levy?
So my guess will be as good as yours. For last 2 to 3 years, there have been discussions to lower the tariff on lentils. It has not happened. If you ask my personal view, I don't think it will happen. It's one of the revenue streams, and we are predicting 700,000 tons of imports. So why should government, curtail that revenue through import tariff? The other way to look at it is, what happens with pigeon peas scenario in India, and if there is a global shortage, right? So and until then, will follow that price bracket along with pigeon peas. To certain extent, to curtail that, there could be a window of 6 months where, it's all probabilities. So there is nothing, sacrosanct about it. Probability of tariff getting, diluted for 6 months till the time next Rabi procurement season comes, because again, government will have farmers' interests on cards, and they will have to take the price back to normalcy, to the MSP level, right? So it is 50-50.
Okay, thank you. Rajendra, there's a question for you. What do you think
Yes,
Sri Lanka has imported so far?
Sri Lanka has imported around up to April, around 48,000 metric tons of lentils.
From January to April?
Yes.
48,000
Yeah, for this year.
Okay.
So,
Brett, there's a question for you. Split between nippers and nuggets and a 2018-19 carryout.
Yeah, well, if the carryout's around 265,000 tonnes and we work off 80%, which roughly will be, it's going to be about 212,000 tonnes of nippers still available of that carryout.
All right. So, Onur, I have a question for you. Your Kazakhstan Russian lentils versus the Canadian lentils. What is the difference in splitting percentage? Do you still get the same yield, or is it?
It depends to the facility, to the splitter, of course, but rule of thumb, we take Kazakhstan lentil split about 70 to 75% efficiency. But the Canadian lentil prices difference is about 30% difference. So this 15 or 10% compared to Canadian efficiency makes up for Kazakh lentil being more attractive.
I see. So
For Canadian lentils, we take about 82-84%, and the Kazakh would be 7 to 75%. Like I said, there's no standard, so you can get very good quality or you can get extra tree quality.
So going forward, does Canada has any future that you will import Canadian lentils, or?
If these red lentil prices in the world increases, it will affect Kazakhstan farmers too. So this is going to create a chain reaction that they're going to plant more pulses. So it's going to be more pressure on Canada or other origins. So you tell me.
Okay.
It's
Ahmed,
tough.
there is a question for you. How much quantity do you think Pakistan has already imported, and what is the potential for 2019?
Well, I have the figures till April, and we have imported roughly around 30,000 tons till April. So I see a potential going forward of another 70 to 80,000 tons.
During 2019?
Yeah, till December.
Okay, that's big.
But starting from May, which we have already done, I don't have that number right now.
All right. So Navneet Singh asks, what is the cost of production to farmers in Canada, Turkey, Australia for red lentils in US dollars? Production farmers, it all depends on the seed cost. Obviously, every year the seed cost is different. So let's start off with Australia. It's a very tough question to answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can actually answer that, to be honest. So I'd have to defer that to the Canadians if they've got any details.
It's not an answer that anybody can give so easily because there's a lot of variables behind it. What is the cost of land? What is the cost of financing? It is not a simple answer to give.
But I can say something about the Turkish farmers. Since TMO, Turkish Grain Board, announced 2.5 kilo, Turkish lira per kilo support, plus all the incentives, this level goes up to 3.8 Turkish lira. So the farmers are happy. Cost of the farming, I'm not sure. I cannot give any wrong information, but farmers in Turkey right now is very happy with this.
I'll just add something to that, Farhan. I suppose from an Australian perspective, most farmers, if the price gets to around $400 or below in Aussie dollar terms, they tend to say, nah, I'll put them in the sheds and in the bins and leave them there. So is that the cost of production, or is that more about what their view are of the market, I guess?
Correct. So there is a question for me as well. What is your price expectation for new crop in bad and good scenario? Wow, it's a simple question. Bad scenario depends on how bad are we. Do we have a crop in Canada or no? Obviously, we will have something, but depending on how the Indian market reacts to their dry weather, how the lemon tour prices trend up in India, there will be a big effect on pricing. Obviously, there is no shortage of supply, but at these numbers, the farmers have generally locked up their bins. They would not sell anything lower than what the prices are today. So we are in a, as I said in the earlier conversation, that we are in a very low price phenomena where, growers are reluctant to sell anything. So yes, in bad scenario, the prices can go way higher, and in good scenario, I don't see prices dropping anything lower than $410, $420 where we are today. Suresh, let's hear Parag first. Parag, how much quantity can be replaced by lentils for Tur?
Very difficult to predict, but the first sport of substitution will be green lentils. There is a consumption in multiple manner which happens for pigeon peas, for Tur. And there is one proportion which goes into tenders, for various supplies of various government institutions. Definitely there we see some kind of substitution to happen quickly, somewhere from July, August onwards, once we start realizing, the heat of the shortage of pigeon peas. Very difficult to put number, but then just to give a wild guess, around 400,000 tons could be the substitution possible, of which 200,000 tons can happen in tenders and the rest in market end consumption.
If India does not step back in, do you see Canadian Australia farmers significantly cutting red lentils production? Obviously, India is a big market, but we don't see that India will not step in, especially with their weather scenario where lemon tour prices are going up, the expectation is low, so we don't see that there will be much of a drop in production unless one year there is no demand. I don't know what you feel from Australia.
Yeah, probably Australia has already reduced its production by hectares, but generally we're finding now, you go years back, we only had a couple of growing regions for Australian lentils, whereas now with the new varieties, we've seen a lot more diverse areas, more marginal country taking up lentils, and they don't have a lot of other options as a break crop. So I don't see them getting out of lentils in any hurry. We've been in a low price environment now for 2 years and they continue to produce. So I don't see that trend changing dramatically. Yes, they'll slow down a little bit, but the typical farmer who has got it in their rotations will continue.
Suresh, your question keeps on coming up. For you, there's no price, whatever you want. 10 FCL price today for Mumbai. Ahmed, I think you should quote that price.
It was on direct trade happening.
Yeah, I think the prices are anywhere from $430 to $460, depending on the variety and what you call. But generally speaking, today Mumbai prices are relatively around $445 to $450 as of today for July. And new crop, everyone is hesitant to sell anything because of the dry conditions in Canada. Parag, the similar question.
So is it pertaining to bread lentils specifically? There are no import restrictions for that matter. 33% including of surcharge is a tariff. I guess it will continue. Well, there will be 700,000 tons of imports expected and government will earn revenue on it by all means. One thing for sure in India, I think all these restrictions and maybe bans or the quantity quotas and all on all types of pulses is a new normal. I guess we need to gear up to those policy interventions. The government, I'm sure they know what they're doing. We may find it knee-jerk at times, but then I guess it's a new normal. So there won't be massive rollbacks happening on all these kind of restrictions. There could be some opening for a certain duration of time, maybe 6 to 9 months, depending on the S&D situation for a particular type of pulses.
I was hoping for some World Cup cricket questions here as well, because there's everybody from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Australia. So you guys are glad you don't have any questions. Anyways, I think our time has come to an end. I'd like to thank the GPC for this wonderful opportunity. And of course, I hope everybody enjoys their time in Rio and keep eating red lentils because our consumption has to go up. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Farhan, and all of the panelists.